7:45.
Let's call it a day, Bob. I'm starved.
Yep, I'll buy you dinner.
Civilian.
8 of the passengers were soldiers and 1 was a Marine. The rest were civilians.
Complicated.
If some of the requirements for graduation seem complicated, ask your guidance counselor to explain them to you.
Concur.
The rules of the game require you to accept the umpire's decision, even if you do not concur with it.
Confirm.
My physician thought I had broken my wrist, and an X-ray later confirmed his opinion.
Digress.
At one point, the speaker digressed to tell of an incident in her childhood, but then she got right back to the topic.
Fragile.
The handle is fragile. It will easily break if you use too much pressure.
Galore.
There were no cabs on the side streets, but on the main street there were cabs galore.
Genuine.
The oil painting looked genuine, but it proved to be a copy of the original.
Hostile.
In the heat of battle, allies are sometimes mistaken for hostile forces.
Impatient.
5 minutes can seem like 5 hours when you are impatient.
Inter.
Many American heroes are interred in Arlington National Cemetery.
Mitigate.
With the help of Novocaine, your dentist can greatly mitigate the pain of drilling.
Novice.
There are 2 slopes, one for experienced skiers and one for novices.
Original.
This is a copy of Thanksgiving Turkey by Grandma Moses. The original is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Rarity.
Rain in the Sahara Desert is a rarity.
Resume.
School closes for the Christmas recess on December 24th and resumes on January 3rd. Please resume your seats.
Shrink.
Wendy shrank from the task of telling her parents about the car accident, but she finally got the courage and told them. Some garments shrink in washing.
Sober.
Someone who has been drinking should not drive, even if he or she feels sober. When he learned of his failure, George thought of quitting school, but after sober consideration, he realized that would be unwise.
Suffice.
I had thought that $60 would suffice for my school supplies. As it turned out, it was not enough.
Vacant.
I had to stand for the first half of the performance because I could not find a vacant seat.
Adjourn.
When we visited Washington, D.C., Congress was not in session. It had adjourned for the Thanksgiving weekend.
Astute.
Marie was the only one to solve the riddle. She is a very astute thinker. An astute Greek tricked the Trojans into opening the gates of Troy.
Censure.
Ali was about to reach for a third slice of cake, but was stopped by a look of censure in Mother's eyes.
Demolish.
It took several days for the wrecking crew to demolish the old building.
Discharge.
After discharging its cargo, the ship will go into dry dock for repairs. One employee was discharged.
Dissent.
There was nearly complete agreement on Al's proposal. Enid and Alice were the only ones who dissented.
Equitable.
The only equitable way for the 3 to share the $600 profit is for each to receive $200.
Exonerate.
The other driver exonerated Isabel of any responsibility for the accident.
Extemporaneous.
It was obvious that the speaker's talk was memorized, though she tried to make it seem extemporaneous.
Extricate.
If you let your assignments pile up, you may get into a situation from which you will not be able to extricate yourself.
Forfeit.
One customer gave a $150 deposit on an order of slipcovers. When they were delivered, she decided she didn't want them. Of course, she forfeited her deposit.
Illegible.
It is fortunate that Miguel uses a computer to do his reports because his handwriting is illegible.
Inadvertently.
I finally found my glasses on the windowsill. I must have left them there inadvertently.
Inappropriate.
Since I was the one who nominated Bruce, it would be inappropriate for me to vote for another candidate.
Lucrative.
This year's school dance was not so lucrative. We made only $150 compared to $375 last year.
Permanent.
Write to me at my temporary address, the Gateway Hotel. As soon as I find an apartment, I shall notify you of my permanent address.
Prohibit.
The library's regulations prohibit the borrowing of reference books.
Punctual.
Be punctual. If you are late, we shall have to depart without you.
Rebuke.
Our coach rebuked the two players who were late for practice, but he praised the rest of the team for their punctuality.
Transient.
It rained all day upstate, but down here we had only a transient shower. It was over in minutes.
Cache.
After confessing, the robber led detectives to a cache of stolen gems in the basement.
Commend.
The volunteers were commended for their heroic efforts to save lives.
Cur.
Lassie is a kind and intelligent animal. Please don't refer to her as a cur.
Despotic.
The American colonists revolted against the despotic rule of George III.
Dispute.
Charlie disputed my solution until I showed him definite proof that I was right.
Edifice.
The huge edifice under construction near the airport will be a hotel.
Era.
The atomic era began with the dropping of the first atomic bomb in 1945.
Initiate.
The Pilgrims initiated the custom of celebrating Thanksgiving Day. Next Friday, our club is going to initiate 3 new members.
Jolly Roger.
The Jolly Roger flying from the mast of the approaching ship indicated that it was a pirate ship.
Multitude.
There was such a multitude outside the store waiting for the sale to begin that we decided to return later.
Perceive.
When the lights went out, I couldn't see a thing, but gradually I was able to perceive the outlines of the larger pieces of furniture.
Portal.
The original doors at the main entrance have been replaced by bronze portals.
Reserved.
Mark was reserved at first, but became much more communicative when he got to know us better.
Restrain.
Mildred could not restrain her impulse to open the package immediately, even though it read, "Do not open before Christmas."
Retract.
You can depend on Frank. Once he has given his promise, he will not retract it.
Spine.
The ribs are curved bones extending from the spine and enclosing the upper part of the body.
Stroll.
It was a warm spring afternoon, and many people were out for a stroll.
Timorous.
I admit I was timorous when I began my speech, but as I went along, I felt less and less afraid.
Tuition.
When I go to college, I will probably work each summer to help pay the tuition.
Version.
Now that we have Vera's description of the accident, let us listen to your version. The Count of Monte Cristo was written in French, but you can read it in the English version.
Aggressor.
In World War II, Japan was the aggressor. Its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor started the conflict in the Pacific.
Altitude.
Mount Washington, which rises to an altitude of 6,288 feet, is the highest peak in the White Mountains.
Calamity.
The assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. were national calamities.
Congregate.
Some homeowners near the school do not like students to congregate on their property.
Convene.
The board of directors will convene next Tuesday to elect a new corporation president.
Cordiality.
Pam's parents greeted me with cordiality and made me feel like an old friend of the family.
Crony.
Some students socialize only with their cronies and rarely try to make new friends.
Deliberately.
We deliberately kept Glenda off the planning committee because we didn't want her to know that the party was to be in her honor. The chef measured out the ingredients deliberately, wanting the amounts to be precise.
Dispense.
Some charitable organizations dispense food to the needy. When our club has a guest speaker, we dispense with the reading of the minutes to save time.
Dubious.
There is no doubt about my feeling better, but it is dubious that I can be back at school by tomorrow.
Extremity.
Key West is at the southern extremity of Florida.
Forecast.
The price of oranges has gone up again, as you forecasted.
Hibernate.
When animals hibernate, their heart rate drops sharply and their body temperature decreases.
Host.
The merchant had expected a host of customers, but only a few appeared. Dad treats his guests with the utmost cordiality. He is an excellent host.
Intimidate.
A few spectators were intimidated by the lion's roar, but most were not frightened.
Preface.
Begin by reading the preface. It will help you to get the most out of the rest of the book.
Recoil.
Marie recoiled at the thought of singing in the amateur show, but she went through with it because she had promised to participate.
Reflection.
When a question is complicated, don't give the first answer that comes to mind. Take time for reflection. Yesterday's defeat was no reflection on our players. They did their very best.
Relinquish.
When an elderly man entered the crowded bus, one of the students relinquished her seat to him.
Tolerate.
Very young children will cry when rebuked. They cannot tolerate criticism.
Capsize.
When Sam's canoe capsized, I swam over to help him turn it right side up.
Contend.
Every spring, some baseball writers try to predict which two teams will contend in the next World Series. Don't argue with the umpire. If she says you are out, it's no use contending you are safe.
Decease.
Shortly after President Kennedy's decease, Vice President Johnson was sworn in as the new chief executive.
Din.
I couldn't hear what you were saying because the plane passing overhead made such a din.
Distinguish.
The twins are so alike that it is hard to distinguish one from the other.
Divulge.
Yesterday, our teacher read us a composition without divulging the name of the writer.
Drought.
While some regions are suffering from drought, others are experiencing heavy rains and floods.
Famish.
The missing hikers were famished when we found them. They had not eaten for more than 12 hours.
Illuminate.
The bright morning sun illuminated the room. There was no need for the lights to be on.
Inaudible.
The only part of your answer I could hear was the first word. The rest was inaudible.
Incense.
Some of the members were so incensed by the way Tamar opened the meeting that they walked right out.
Inundate.
The rainstorm inundated a number of streets in low-lying areas.
Jeopardy!
If you arrive late for a job interview, your chances of being hired will be in serious jeopardy.
Magnify.
The bacteria shown in your textbook have been greatly magnified. Their actual size is considerably smaller.
Municipal.
Your mother works for the city? How interesting. My father is also a municipal employee.
Puncture.
Our neighbor swept a nail off his curb and later it punctured one of his own tires.
Rummage.
Someone must have rummaged my desk. Everything in it is in disorder.
Simultaneously.
The twins began school simultaneously, but they did not graduate at the same time.
Subsequently.
When I first saw that dress, it was $49.95. Subsequently, it was reduced to $29.95. Now it is on sale for $19.95.
Survive.
After landing at Plymouth, the Pilgrims suffered greatly. About half of them failed to survive the first winter.
Traverse.
The Trans-Siberian Railroad, completed in 1905, traverses the Asian continent.
Velocity.
Do you know that light travels at a velocity of 186,000 miles a second?
Accommodate.
The new restaurant will accommodate 128 persons. I'm sorry I have no pen to lend you. Ask Norman. Perhaps he can accommodate you.
Apprehend.
Now I see how foolish I was to apprehend the outcome of the test. I passed easily. The escaped prisoners were apprehended as they tried to cross the border.
Cleave.
Some of the residents are hostile to new ways. They cleave to the customs and traditions of the past.
Conceal.
I answered all questions truthfully, for I had nothing to conceal.
Content.
If you are not content with the merchandise, you may return it for an exchange or a refund.
Culprit.
The last time we were late for the party, I was the culprit. I wasn't ready when you called for me.
Eliminate.
The new director hopes to reduce expenses by eliminating unnecessary jobs.
Facetious.
Bea meant it when she said she was quitting the team. She was not being facetious.
Fatigue.
Why not take the elevator? Climbing the stairs will fatigue you.
Infallible.
When Phil disputes my answer or I question his, we take it to our math teacher. We consider her judgment infallible.
Pilfer.
The shoplifter was apprehended after pilfering several small articles.
Province.
If your brother misbehaves, you have no right to punish him. That is not your province.
Reflect.
I could have given a much better answer if I had had the time to reflect.
Reverse.
If found guilty, a person may appeal to a higher court in the hope that it will reverse the verdict.
Shallow.
Non-swimmers must use the shallow part of the pool.
Superfluous.
We already have enough volunteers. Additional help would be superfluous.
Surmount.
At the end of the third quarter, the visitors were ahead by 18 points, a lead that our team was unable to surmount.
Urban.
In the United States today, the urban population far outnumbers the farm population.
Vicinity.
Katerina lost her keys in the vicinity of Pine Street and Wyoming Avenue.
Vocation.
Ruth will be studying to be an engineer. Bob plans to enter teaching. I, however, have not yet chosen a vocation.
Abate.
The water shortage is abating, but it is still a matter of some concern. Helen's close defeat in the tennis tournament has not abated her zeal for the game.
Accord.
If both sides to the dispute can be brought to the conference table, perhaps they can come to an accord.
Aggravate.
If your sunburn itches, don't scratch. That will only aggravate it.
Belligerent.
Bert still has a tendency to settle his arguments with his fists. When will he learn that it's childish to be so belligerent?
Conspicuous.
Among Manhattan's skyscrapers, the Empire State Building is conspicuous for its superior height.
Craft.
The weavers of Oriental rugs are famous for their remarkable craft. The Greeks took Troy by craft. They used the trick of the wooden horse.
Craven.
Henry Fleming thought he would be a hero, but as the fighting began, he fled from the field in craven fear.
Currency.
Some New England tribes used beads as currency.
Deter.
The heavy rain did not deter people from coming to the play. Nearly every seat was occupied.
Duplicate.
If the photocopying machine had been working, I could have made a duplicate of my history notes for my friend who was absent.
Fictitious.
In Johnny Tremaine, there are fictitious characters like Johnny and Rab, as well as real ones like Samuel Adams and Paul Revere. The suspect said she lived at 423 Green Street, but she later admitted it was a fictitious address.
Immaculate.
The curtains were spotless. The tablecloth was immaculate too.
Intervene.
More than 2 months intervene between a president's election and the day he takes office. Ralph is unhappy that I stepped into the dispute between him and his brother. He did not want me to intervene.
Miniature.
Kim has a miniature stapler in her bag. It takes up very little room.
Quintet.
A basketball team, because it has 5 players, is often called a quintet.
Reconcile.
Pat and Tom are friends again. I wonder who reconciled them. We are friends again. We have reconciled our differences.
Rural.
6 inches of snow fell in the city and up to 14 inches in the rural areas upstate.
Security.
Guests are advised to deposit their valuables in the hotel's vault for greater security. Security has been tightened at airports.
Stamina.
Swimming the English Channel is a feat that requires considerable stamina.
Volition.
Did the employer dismiss him, or did he leave of his own volition?
Alternative.
If given the choice of making either an oral or a written report, I would pick the second alternative.
Beverage.
Orange juice is a healthful beverage.
Blunder.
Have you ever committed the blunder of mailing a letter without a postage stamp?
Controversy.
The Republicans and the Democrats have been engaged in a controversy over which party is responsible for the increased taxes.
Custody.
The treasurer has custody of our club's financial records.
Diminutive.
To an observer in an airplane high over the city, even the largest buildings seem diminutive.
Dispel.
The 2 officers were commended for their skill in dispelling the mob and preventing violence.
Dormant.
In early spring, new buds begin to appear on trees and shrubs that have been dormant all winter.
Exclusively.
Mrs. Lopez had bought the computer for all of her children, but the oldest behaved as if it were exclusively his.
Exempt.
A certain portion of each person's income is legally exempt from taxation.
Imperil.
The fishing vessel was imperiled by high winds, but it managed to reach port safely.
Lineage.
A study of Franklin D. Roosevelt's lineage shows that he was descended from a Dutch ancestor who settled in America about 1638.
Major.
When the major companies in an industry raise prices, the smaller ones usually follow suit.
Objective.
Our fund has already raised $650. Its objective is $1,000.
Opinionated.
If you keep arguing that you are right in the face of overwhelming objective evidence that you are wrong, you are opinionated.
Presently.
We won't have to wait long for our bus. It will be here presently.
Procrastinate.
When a book is due, return it to the library promptly. Otherwise, you will be fined 10 cents for every day you procrastinate.
Prodigious.
The average American city requires a prodigious amount of fresh milk daily.
Protract.
The visitors had planned to stay for a few hours only, but they were persuaded to protract their visit.
Retain.
The corporation will close its restaurants but retain its most profitable clothing stores.
Adroit.
Our adroit passing enabled us to score 4 touchdowns.
Ambidextrous.
Ruth is an ambidextrous hitter. She can bat right-handed or left-handed.
Apprentice.
Young Ben Franklin learned the printing trade by serving as an apprentice to his half-brother James.
Aptitude.
Cindy is not clumsy with tools. She has mechanical aptitude.
Craftsperson.
To build a house, you need the services of carpenters, bricklayers, plumbers, and electricians. Each one must be a skilled craftsperson.
Dexterity.
You can't expect an apprentice to have the same dexterity as a skilled worker.
Maladroit.
A maladroit worker banged his thumb with a hammer.
Versatile.
Leonardo da Vinci was remarkably versatile. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, engineer, and scientist.
Destitute.
The severe earthquake killed hundreds of persons and left thousands destitute.
Economize.
Consumers can economize by buying their milk in gallon containers.
Frugal.
The old man had nothing to eat but bread and cheese, yet he offered to share this frugal meal with his visitor. My weekly allowance for lunches and fares isn't much, but I can get by on it if I am frugal.
Impoverish.
The increase in dues of only $1 a year will not impoverish anyone.
Indigence.
By hard work, countless thousands of Americans have raised themselves from indigence to wealth.
Affluent.
The new wing to the hospital is a gift from an affluent humanitarian.
Avarice.
If manufacturers were to raise prices without justification, they could be accused of avarice.
Avaricious.
An avaricious person likes to get and keep, but not to give or share.
Covet.
Jorge coveted his neighbor's farm but could not get her to sell it.
Dowry.
The dowry that his wife brought him enabled the Italian engraver Piranesi to devote himself completely to art.
Financial.
People who keep spending more than they earn usually get into financial difficulties.
Fleece.
If your sister paid $9,000 for that car, she was fleeced. The mechanic says it is worth $5,500.
Hoard.
Aunt Bonnie had a reputation as a miser who hoarded every penny she could get her hands on.
Lavish.
The young heir was warned that he would soon have nothing left if he continued to be lavish with money. Vera's composition is good, but it doesn't deserve the lavish praise that Linda gave it.
Lucrative.
Because the gift shop did not produce a sufficient profit, the owner decided to go into a more lucrative business.
Means.
To own an expensive home, a yacht, and a limousine, you have to be a person of means.
Opulence.
Dickens contrasts the opulence of France's nobility with the indigence of her peasants.
Sumptuous.
The car with the leather upholstery and thick rugs is beautiful, but a bit sumptuous for my simple tastes.
Apprehensive.
Apprehensive parents telephoned the school when the class was late in getting home from the museum.
Cower.
If you stand up to your bullying sister instead of cowering before her, she may back down.
Dastardly.
It was dastardly of the captain to desert the sinking vessel and leave the passengers to fend for themselves.
Intimidate.
The younger children would not have given up the playing field so quickly if the older ones hadn't intimidated them.
Poltroon.
Like the poltroon that he was, Talston hid under a bed when he saw a fight coming.
Timid.
If the other team challenges us, we should accept. Let's not be so timid.
Trepidation.
I thought Carol would be nervous when she made her speech, but she delivered it without trepidation.
Audacious.
The audacious sea captain set a course for uncharted waters. After we had waited for about 20 minutes, an audacious latecomer strolled up and tried to get in at the head of our line.
Audacity.
Oliver Twist, 9-year-old poorhouse inmate, was put into solitary confinement when he had the audacity to ask for a second helping of porridge.
Dauntless.
The frightened sailors wanted to turn back, but their dauntless captain urged them to sail on.
Exploit.
Amelia Earhart won worldwide fame for her exploits as an aviator.
Fortitude.
The officer showed remarkable fortitude in remaining on duty despite a painful wound.
Indomitable.
The bronco that would not be broken through all its riders. It had an indomitable will to be free.
Plucky.
After 2 days on a life raft, the plucky survivors were rescued by a helicopter.
Rash.
When you lose your temper, you may say or do something rash and regret it afterward.
Alias.
Inspector Javert discovered that Monsieur Madeleine was not the mayor's real name, but an alias for Jean Valjean, the ex-convict.
Clandestine.
Before the Revolutionary War, a patriot underground organization used to hold clandestine meetings in Boston.
Enigma.
I have read the sentence several times but cannot understand it. Maybe you can help me with this enigma.
Latent.
A good education will help you discover and develop your latent talents.
Lurk.
Catherine called the police when she noticed a stranger lurking behind her neighbor's garage.
Seclude.
To find a quiet place to study, Amy had to seclude herself in the attic.
Stealthy.
The spy had to be very stealthy to get past the 2 guards without being noticed.
Apprise.
The magazine has apprised its readers of an increase in rates beginning May 1st.
Avowal.
The white flag of surrender is an avowal of defeat.
Divulge.
I told my secret only to Margaret because I knew she would not divulge it.
Illicit.
By questioning the witness, the attorney elicited that it was raining at the time of the accident.
Enlighten.
The newcomer was going in the wrong direction until someone enlightened him that his room was at the other end of the hall.
Manifest.
I am surprised that Harriet is taking an art course because she has never, to my knowledge, manifested any interest in the subject.
Overt.
The concealed camera recorded the overt acceptance of the bribe.
Accede.
When I asked my teacher if I might change my topic, he readily acceded to my request.
Accord.
Though we are in accord on what our goals should be, we differ on the means for achieving them.
Compact.
The states bordering on the Delaware River have entered into a compact for the sharing of its water.
Compatible.
Arthur and I can't be on the same committee. We're not compatible.
Compromise.
At first, the union and management were far apart on wages, but they finally came to a compromise.
Conform.
When a new style in clothes appears, do you hasten to conform?
Consistent.
By bringing up an unrelated matter, you are not being consistent with your previous statement that we should stick to the topic.
Correspond.
The rank of second lieutenant in the Army corresponds to that of ensign in the Navy.
Dovetail.
Gilbert's skill as a writer dovetailed with Sullivan's talent as a composer, resulting in the famous Gilbert and Sullivan operettas.
Reconcile.
After their quarrel, Althea and Pat refused to talk to each other until I reconciled them.
Relent.
Serena gave her parents so many good reasons for letting her borrow the car that they finally relented.
Altercation.
We halted the altercation by separating the two opponents before they could come to blows.
Antagonize.
The official antagonized the leader of her own party by not campaigning for him.
Cleavage.
We hope compromise will repair the cleavage in our ranks.
Discord.
Billy Budd put an end to the discord aboard the Rights of Man. He was an excellent peacemaker.
Discrepancy.
80 people were at the dance, but only 74 tickets were collected at the door. What accounts for this discrepancy?
Dissent.
The vote approving the amendment was far from unanimous. 6 members dissented.
Embroil.
My enthusiastic support for Lynette's candidacy soon embroiled me in a debate with her opponents.
Estrange.
A quarrel over an inheritance estranged the brothers for many years.
Friction.
At the budget hearing, there was considerable friction between the supporters and the opponents of higher taxes.
Irreconcilable.
It is doubtful whether anyone can make peace between the estranged partners. They have become irreconcilable.
Litigation.
Some business disputes can be settled out of court. Others require litigation.
At variance.
Cynthia is an independent thinker. Her opinions are often at variance with those of the rest of our group.
Wrangle.
When I left, 2 neighbors were quarreling noisily. When I returned an hour later, they were still wrangling.
Condiment.
There is a shelf in our kitchen for pepper, salt, mustard, ketchup, and other condiments.
Devour.
The hikers were so hungry that they devoured the food as fast as it was served.
Edible.
Never eat wild mushrooms, even though they look edible. They may be poisonous.
Glutton.
Andrea had a second helping and would have taken a third, except that she didn't want to be considered a glutton. He is a glutton for punishment.
Luscious.
Ripe watermelon is luscious. Everyone will want a second slice.
Palatable.
The main dish had little flavor, but I made it more palatable by adding condiments.
Slake.
On a sultry afternoon, there is a long line of people at the drinking fountain waiting to slake their thirst.
Succulent.
The steak will be dry if you leave it in the oven longer. Take it out now if you want it to be succulent.
Voracious.
If Chester skips breakfast, he is voracious by lunchtime.
Colossal.
The game was played in a colossal sports arena with a seating capacity of more than 60,000.
Commodious.
It will be easy to move in the equipment because the halls and stairways are commodious.
Gamut.
First I thought I had done very well, then well, and finally poorly. I ran the gamut from confidence to despair.
Infinite.
We do not know whether space is bounded or infinite.
Infinitesimal.
If there is any salt in this soup, it must be infinitesimal. I can't taste it.
Inflate.
Since one of the tires had lost air, we stopped at a gas station to inflate it.
Inordinate.
If you eat an inordinate amount of sweets, you are likely to gain weight.
Iota.
If you make the same mistake again, despite all my warnings, I will not have one iota of sympathy for you.
Magnitude.
To supervise 800 employees is a responsibility of considerable magnitude.
Picayune.
In studying, don't spend too much time on picayune details. Concentrate on the really important matters.
Pittance.
At those low wages, few will apply for the job. Who wants to work for a pittance?
Puny.
The skyscraper dwarfs the surrounding buildings. By comparison to it, they seem puny.
Superabundance.
Ronald's committee doesn't need any more assistants. He has a superabundance of helpers.
Debilitate.
The fever had so debilitated the patient that she lacked the strength to sit up.
Decadent.
When industry moves away, a flourishing town may quickly become decadent.
Decrepit.
Billy Dawes rode past the redcoats on a horse that looked decrepit and about to collapse.
Dilapidated.
Up the road was an abandoned farmhouse, partially in ruins, and near it a barn even more dilapidated.
Enervate.
The extreme heat had enervated us. We had to rest under a shady tree until our strength was restored.
Flimsy.
Judy understands algebra well, but I have only a flimsy grasp of the subject.
Frail.
Mountain climbing is for the robust, not the frail.
Incapacitate.
Ruth will be absent today. A sore throat has incapacitated her.
Infirmity.
On leaving the hospital, John felt almost too weak to walk, but he soon overcame this infirmity.
Bulwark.
For centuries, the British regarded their navy as the principal bulwark against invasion.
Citadel.
The fortified city of Singapore was once considered unconquerable. In 1942, however, this citadel fell to the Japanese.
Cogent.
A request for a raise is more likely to succeed if supported with cogent reasons.
Dynamic.
Audrey represents us forcefully and energetically. She is a dynamic speaker.
Formidable.
The climbers gasped when they caught sight of the formidable peak.
Fort.
I am better than Jack in writing, but not in math. That is his fort.
Impregnable.
Before World War II, the French regarded their Maginot Line fortifications as an impregnable bulwark against a German invasion.
Invigorate.
If you feel enervated by the heat, try a swim in the cool ocean. It will invigorate you.
Robust.
The lifeguard was in excellent physical condition. I had never seen anyone more robust.
Tenacious.
After the dog got the ball, I tried to dislodge it from her tenacious jaws, but I couldn't.
Vehement.
Your protest was too mild. If it had been more vehement, the supervisor might have paid attention to it.
Vigor.
The robust young pitcher performed with extraordinary vigor for 7 innings, but weakened in the 8th and was removed from the game.
Default.
The Royals must be on the playing field by 4 p.m. If they do not appear, they will lose the game by default.
Heedless.
If you drive in a blizzard, heedless of the Weather Bureau's warnings, you may not reach your destination.
Ignore.
Justin was given a ticket for ignoring a stop sign.
Inadvertent.
Unfortunately, I made an inadvertent remark in Irma's presence about her losing the election.
Neglect.
Most members of the cast neglected their studies during rehearsals, but after the performance they caught up quickly.
Remiss.
The owner of the stolen car was remiss in having left the keys in the vehicle.
Sloven.
Cleanup is easy at our lunch table if there are no slovens.
Discreet.
You were discreet not to say anything about our plans when Harry was here. He can't keep a secret.
Heed.
I didn't heed the warning that the pavements were icy. That's why I slipped.
Meticulous.
Before signing a contract, read it carefully, including the fine print. This is one case where it pays to be meticulous.
Scrupulous.
My instructor refuses to be a judge because 2 of her former students are contestants. She is very scrupulous.
Scrutinize.
The gatekeeper scrutinized Harvey's pass before letting him in, but he just glanced at mine.
Solicitude.
My sister's solicitude over getting into college ended when she received word that she had been accepted.
Vigilance.
The security guard who apprehended the thief was praised for vigilance.
Wary.
General Braddock might not have been defeated if he had been wary of an ambush.
Abroad.
After living abroad for a time, Robert Browning became homesick for his native England.
Commute.
Large numbers of suburban residents regularly commute to the city.
Denizen.
On their safari, the tourists photographed lions, leopards, and other ferocious denizens of the jungle.
Domicile.
Soon after they moved, the Coopers invited us to visit them at their new domicile.
Inmate.
When the warden took charge, the prison had fewer than 100 inmates.
Migrate.
Because they were persecuted in England, the Puritans migrated to Holland. In winter, many European birds migrate to the British Isles in search of a more temperate climate.
Native.
His entire family are natives of New Jersey, except the grandparents who were born abroad.
Nomad.
Nomads have no fixed homes, but move from region to region to secure their food supply.
Sojourn.
On her trip home, Geraldine will stop in St. Louis for a 2-day sojourn with relatives.
Defiance.
The union showed defiance of the court order against a strike by calling the workers off their jobs.
Infraction.
Unless the driver has a permit, parking in a handicapped space is an infraction of the law.
Insubordinate.
Had the cabinet officer ignored the president's instructions, he would have been insubordinate and would have been asked to resign.
Insurgent.
When the revolt broke out, the government ordered its troops to arrest the insurgents.
Malcontent.
The work stoppage was caused by a few malcontents who felt they had been ignored when promotions were made.
Perverse.
Though I had carefully explained the shorter route to him, the perverse young man came by the longer way.
Sedition.
During World War I, about 1,500 persons who spoke or wrote against our form of government or the war effort were arrested for sedition.
Transgress.
The coach imposed strict training rules on the soccer team, and he scolded any player who transgressed.
Trespass.
The owner erected a keep-off sign to discourage people from trespassing on her land.
Acquiesce.
When Tom suggested that we go to the movies, I acquiesced because there seemed nothing else to do.
Allegiance.
When aliens become American citizens, they must pledge allegiance to the United States.
Defer.
I thought my answer was correct, but I deferred to the teacher's opinion because of her superior knowledge.
Discipline.
The Walkers should not complain that their son does not obey because they never tried to discipline him.
Docile.
Diane listens when you explain something to her, but her sister is much less docile.
Meek.
About a third of the commuters protested the fare hike. The rest were too meek to complain.
Pliable.
We tried to get Joe to change his mind, but he was not pliable. Perhaps you can influence him.
Submit.
Though he had boasted he would never be taken alive, the fugitive submitted without a struggle when the police arrived.
Tractable.
George III wanted the 13 colonies to be tractable.
Chronic.
Carl's sore arm is not a new development, but the return of a chronic ailment. Some people are chronic complainers. They are always dissatisfied.
Concurrent.
When the strike is settled, there will probably be an increase in wages and a concurrent increase in prices.
Dawdle.
Let's get going. If we dawdle, we'll be late for dinner.
Imminent.
The sudden darkening of the skies and the thunder in the distance apprised us that rain was imminent.
Incipient.
Certain serious diseases can be successfully treated if detected in an incipient stage.
Intermittent.
The showers were intermittent. There were intervals when the sun broke through the clouds.
Perennial.
Don't think that war has plagued only modern times. It has been a perennial curse. Marigolds last only one season, but perennial plants such as lilies return year after year.
Procrastinate.
Most of the picnickers took cover when rain seemed imminent. The few that procrastinated got drenched.
Protract.
We had planned to stay only for lunch, but at our host's insistence, we protracted our visit until after dinner.
Sporadic.
Though polio has been practically wiped out, there have been sporadic cases of the disease.
Compulsory.
State law makes attendance at school compulsory for children of certain ages.
Entail.
A larger apartment will of course entail greater expense.
Essence.
The union and management held a lengthy meeting without getting to the essence of the dispute, wages.
Gratuitous.
Were it not for her gratuitous interference, the opposing sides would have quickly settled their dispute.
Imperative.
To maintain a good credit rating, it is imperative that you pay your bills on time.
Incumbent.
Arlo felt it incumbent on him to pay for the window since he had hit the ball that broke it.
Indispensable.
If we have to, we can do without luxuries and entertainment. However, food, shelter, and clothing are indispensable.
Necessitate.
The sharp increase in the cost of fuel necessitated a rise in the bus fare.
Oblige.
The law obliges the police to secure a warrant before making a search.
Obviate.
Karen has agreed to lend me the book I need. This obviates my trip to the library.
Prerequisite.
A satisfactory grade in basic art is a prerequisite for advanced art.
Pressing.
Before rearranging my furniture, I have some more pressing matters to attend to, such as finishing my research paper.
Superfluous.
Our town already has enough gas stations. An additional one would be superfluous.
Forearm.
A weightlifter has well-developed forearms.
Forebear.
Do you know from whom you are descended? Who were your forebears?
Foreboding.
The day before the accident, I had a foreboding that something would go wrong.
Forecast.
Have you listened to the weather forecast for the weekend?
Forefront.
The mayor is at the forefront of the drive to attract new industry to the city.
Foregoing.
Carefully review the foregoing chapter before reading any further.
Foremost.
Marie Curie was one of the foremost scientists of the 20th century.
Foreshadow.
Our defeat in the championship game was foreshadowed by injuries to two of our star players in the previous game.
Foresight.
Foresight is better than hindsight.
Forward.
Before Chapter 1, there is a brief foreword in which the author explains the aims of the book.
Misbelief.
People generally believe the Earth was flat until Columbus's momentous voyage corrected that misbelief.
Misdeed.
The criminals were punished for their misdeeds by fines and prison terms.
Misfire.
The soldier's weapon misfired during target practice.
Misgiving.
With excellent weather and a fine driver, we had no misgivings about the trip.
Mishap.
Right after the collision, each driver blamed the other for the mishap.
Mislay.
Yesterday I mislaid my keys and it took me about a half hour to find them.
Mislead.
Some labels are so confusing that they mislead shoppers.
Misstep.
Quitting school is a misstep that you may regret for the rest of your life.
Outgrow.
The jacket I got last year is too small. I have outgrown it.
Outlandish.
Costume parties are amusing because people come in such outlandish costumes.
Outlast.
The table is more solidly constructed than the chairs and will probably outlast them.
Outlook.
The outlook for unskilled laborers is not bright.
Output.
The output of the average American factory increases as new equipment is introduced.
Outrun.
The thief thought he could outrun his pursuers.
Outspoken.
Alma sometimes hurts others when she criticizes their work because she is too outspoken.
Outwit.
The fictional detective Sherlock Holmes manages to outwit the cleverest criminals.
Overbearing.
Once Jason was given a little authority, he began to issue orders in an overbearing manner.
Overburden.
It would overburden me to go shopping Thursday because I have so much homework that day.
Overconfident.
I was so sure of passing that I wasn't going to study, but David advised me not to be overconfident.
Overdose.
Do not take more of the medicine than the doctor ordered. An overdose may be dangerous.
Overestimate.
Joe overestimated the capacity of the bus. He thought it could hold 60. It has room for only 48.
Overgenerous.
Because the service was poor, Gina thought I was overgenerous in leaving a 15% tip.
Overshadow.
Gary's errors in the field overshadowed his good work at the plate. Don's game-saving catch overshadowed his previous errors in the outfield.
Oversupply.
There is a shortage of skilled technicians, but an oversupply of unskilled workers.
Overwhelm.
The security guards were nearly overwhelmed by the crowds of shoppers waiting for the sale to begin.
Unabridged.
Though an abridged dictionary is convenient to use, it contains far fewer definitions than an unabridged dictionary.
Unbiased.
Don't ask the mother of a contestant to serve as a judge because it may be hard for her to remain unbiased.
Unconcern.
The audience was breathless with anxiety during the daring tightrope act, though the acrobats themselves performed with seeming unconcern for their own safety.
Undeceive.
If you think I can get Mrs. Owens to hire you because she is my cousin, let me undeceive you. I have no influence with her.
Ungag.
With the dictator's downfall, the censorship decrees were abolished and the press was ungagged.
Unnerve.
The harassing noises of hostile fans so unnerved our star player that he missed 2 foul shots in a row.
Unquenchable.
As a teenager, Jules had an unquenchable thirst for adventure stories. He read one after another.
Unscramble.
The previous secretary had mixed up the files so badly that it took me a week to unscramble them.
Unshackle.
When a captain put mutinous sailors in irons in the olden days, nobody was allowed to unshackle them.
Unwary.
An unwary pedestrian is much more likely to be struck by a car than one who looks both ways and crosses with the light.
Underbrush.
On its way through the dense jungle, the patrol had to be constantly wary of enemy soldiers who might be lurking in the underbrush.
Underdeveloped.
The United States has spent billions to help the underdeveloped nations improve their standard of living.
Undergraduate.
Full-time undergraduates can earn a bachelor's degree in 4 years.
Underpayment.
If too little is deducted from your weekly wages for income tax, the result is an underpayment at the end of the year.
Underprivileged.
The goal of the fund is to give as many underprivileged children as possible an opportunity for a vacation away from the city next summer.
Underscore.
When you take notes, underscore items that are especially important.
Undersell.
The expression, "you can't get it anywhere else for less," means about the same as, "we will not be undersold."
Undersigned.
Among the undersigned in the petition to the governor were some of the most prominent persons in the state.
Understatement.
Frank's remark that he was slightly bruised in the accident is an understatement. He suffered 2 fractured ribs.
Understudy.
While Madeline is recuperating from her illness, her role will be played by an understudy.
Upcoming.
A monthly bulletin mailed to each customer gives news of upcoming sales.
Update.
New highway construction requires auto clubs to update their roadmaps annually.
Upgrade.
Many employees attend evening courses to upgrade their skills and improve their chances for promotion.
Upheaval.
The Prime Minister's proposal for new taxes created such an upheaval that his government fell.
Upkeep.
Susan traded in her old car because the upkeep had become too high.
Uplift.
The news that employers are rehiring has uplifted the hopes of many of the unemployed.
Upright.
When knocked to the canvas, the boxer waited till the count of 9 before resuming an upright position.
Uproot.
The love of liberty is so firmly embedded in people's hearts that no tyrant can hope to uproot it.
Upstart.
When the new representative entered the legislature, some older members regarded her as an upstart.
Upturn.
Most merchants report a slowdown in sales for October, but confidently expect an upturn with the approach of Christmas.
Withdraw.
The community association is her principal backer. If it withdraws its support, I don't see how she can be elected. The invaders were ordered to withdraw.
Withdrawn.
Lola's brother keeps to himself and hardly says anything, though we try to be friendly. He seems withdrawn.
Withhold.
I would appreciate it if you would please withhold your comment until I have finished speaking.
Withholding tax.
Your employer is required to deduct a certain amount from your salary as a withholding tax payable to the federal government.
Withstand.
The walls of a dam must be strong enough to withstand tremendous water pressure.
Notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding their advantage of height, the visitors were unable to beat our basketball team.
Abdicate.
The aging monarch abdicated the throne and went into retirement.
Abduct.
The Greeks attacked Troy to recover Helen, who had been abducted by the Trojan prince Paris.
Abhor.
Janet is doing her best to pass the course because she abhors the thought of having to repeat it in summer school.
Abnormal.
We had 3 absences today, which is abnormal. Usually everyone is present.
Abrasion.
The automobile was a total wreck, but the driver luckily escaped with minor cuts and abrasions.
Abrupt.
Today's art lesson came to an abrupt end when the gong sounded for a fire drill.
Abscond.
A wide search is underway for the manager who absconded with the company's funds.
Absolve.
Ignorance of the law does not absolve a person from obeying it. Of the 3 suspects, 2 were found guilty and the 3rd was absolved.
Absorbing.
That was an absorbing book. It held my interest from beginning to end.
Abstain.
My dentist said I would have fewer cavities if I abstained from sweets.
Averse.
I am in favor of the dance, but I am averse to holding it on May 25th.
Avert.
The mayor tried to avert a strike by municipal employees.
Avocation.
My aunt, a pediatrician, composes music as an avocation.
Adapt.
People who work at night have to adapt themselves to sleeping in the daytime. Lorraine Hansberry's hit Broadway play, A Raisin in the Sun, was later adapted for the screen.
Addicted.
You will not become addicted to smoking if you refuse cigarettes when they are offered.
Adequate.
The student who arrived 10 minutes late did not have adequate time to finish the test.
Adherent.
You can count on Martha's support in your campaign for re-election. She is one of your most loyal adherents.
Adjacent.
The island of Cuba is adjacent to Florida.
Adjoin.
Mexico adjoins the United States.
Adjourn.
The judge adjourned the court to the following Monday.
Advent.
The Weather Bureau gave adequate warning of the advent of the hurricane.
Adversary.
Before the contest began, the champion and her adversary shook hands.
Adverse.
Because of adverse reviews, the producer announced that the play will close with tonight's performance.
Antecedents.
Ronald's antecedents came to this country more than 100 years ago.
Antedate.
If you used yesterday's date on a check written today, you have antedated the check. Alaska antedates Hawaii as a state, having gained statehood on January 3, 1959, 7 months before Hawaii.
Postdate.
I postdated the check. It has tomorrow's date on it.
Antemeridium.
In 9 a.m., a.m. stands for antemeridium, meaning before noon.
Postmeridium.
In 9 p.m., p.m. stands for postmeridium, meaning afternoon.
Anteroom.
If the physician is busy when patients arrive, the nurse asks them to wait in the anteroom.
Postgraduate.
After college, Nina hopes to do postgraduate work in law school.
Postmortem.
The purpose of a postmortem is to discover the cause of death. In a postmortem after a defeat, we discuss what went wrong and what we can do to improve.
Postscript.
After signing the letter, I noticed I had omitted an important fact, and I had to add a postscript.
Bicameral.
Our legislature is bicameral. It consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Bicentennial.
Our nation's bicentennial was celebrated in 1976.
Biennial.
A defeated candidate for the House of Representatives can run again in 2 years because the elections are biennial.
Semi-annual.
Promotion in our school is semi-annual, occurring in January and June.
Bimonthly.
We receive only 6 utility bills a year because we are billed on a bi-monthly basis.
Semi-monthly.
Employees paid on a semi-monthly basis receive 2 salary checks per month.
Bilateral.
French forces joined the Americans in a bilateral action against the British at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781.
Bilingual.
New York has a large number of bilingual citizens who speak English and a foreign language. The instructions on the voting machine are bilingual. They are in English and Spanish.
Bipartisan.
Congressional committees are bipartisan. They include Democratic and Republican members.
Bisect.
A diameter is a line that bisects a circle.
Semicircle.
At the end of the lesson, students gathered about the teacher in a semicircle to ask additional questions.
Semi-conscious.
In the morning, as you begin to awaken, you are in a semi-conscious state.
Semi-detached.
All the houses on the block are attached, except the corner ones, which are semi-detached.
Semi-skilled.
Workers in a semi-skilled job usually do not require a long period of training.
Emigrate.
At 13, Maria Callas emigrated from the United States.
Immigrate.
At 13, Maria Callas immigrated to Greece.
Eminent.
Maria Callas became an eminent opera singer.
Imminent.
At the first flash of lightning, the beach crowd scurried for shelter from the imminent storm.
Enervate.
I was so enervated by the broiling sun that I had to sit down.
Erosion.
Running water is one of the principal causes of soil erosion.
Evoke.
The suggestion to lengthen the school year has evoked considerable opposition.
Invoke.
Refusing to answer the question, the witness invoked the Fifth Amendment, which protects persons from being compelled to testify against themselves.
Excise.
With a penknife, he peeled the apple and excised the wormy part.
Incise.
The letters on the cornerstone had been incised with a power drill.
Exclusive.
An exclusive club does not readily accept newcomers. Before the game, each team had exclusive use of the field for a 10-minute practice period.
Inclusive.
The film will be shown from August 22nd to 24th, inclusive, for a total of 3 days. An unabridged dictionary is much more inclusive than an ordinary desk dictionary.
Exhibit.
The museum is now exhibiting the art of the Inuit people of northern Canada.
Inhibit.
Many could not inhibit their tears. They cried openly.
Expel.
The student who was expelled from the university because of poor grades applied for readmission the following term.
Impel.
We do not know what impelled the secretary to resign.
Implicate.
One of the accused persons confessed and implicated two others in the crime.
Impugn.
The treasurer should not have been offended when asked for a financial report. No one was impugning his honesty.
Incarcerate.
After their escape and recapture, the convicts were incarcerated in a more secure prison.
Inscribe.
The name of the winner will be inscribed on the medal.
Insurgent.
The ruler promised to pardon any insurgents who would lay down their arms.
Extracurricular.
Why don't you join an extracurricular activity, such as a club, the school newspaper, or a team?
Extraneous.
You said you would stick to the topic, but you keep introducing extraneous issues.
Extravagant.
Reliable manufacturers do not make extravagant claims for their products. In a few months, the extravagant heir spent the fortune of a lifetime.
Intramural.
At most schools, the students participating in intramural athletics vastly outnumber the students involved in interscholastic sports.
Intra-party.
The Democrats are trying to heal intra-party strife so as to present a united front in the coming election.
Intrastate.
Commerce between the states is regulated by the Interstate Commerce Commission, but intrastate commerce is supervised by the states themselves.
Intravenous.
Patients are nourished by intravenous feeding when too ill to take food by mouth.
Con.
I abstained from casting my ballot because I could not decide whether to vote pro or con.
Contraband.
Customs officials examined the luggage of the suspected smuggler but found no contraband.
Contravene.
By invading the neutral nation, the dictator contravened an earlier pledge to guarantee its independence.
Controversy.
Our controversy with Great Britain over the Oregon Territory nearly led to war.
Counter.
The student's plan to drop out of school runs counter to his parents' wishes.
Countermand.
The health commissioner ordered the plant to close, but a judge countermanded the order.
Incontrovertible.
The suspect's fingerprints on the safe were considered incontrovertible evidence of participation in the robbery.
Intercede.
I would have lost my place online if you hadn't interceded for me.
Intercept.
We gained possession of the ball when Russ intercepted a forward pass.
Interlinear.
It is difficult to make interlinear notes if the space between the lines is very small.
Interlude.
Between World War I and II, there was a 21-year interlude of peace.
Intermediary.
For his role as intermediary in helping to end the Russo-Japanese War, Theodore Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Intermission.
During the intermission between the first and second acts, you will have a chance to purchase refreshments.
Intersect.
Broadway intersects 7th Avenue at Times Square.
Interurban.
The only way to get to the next town is by automobile or taxi. There is no interurban bus.
Intervene.
The summer vacation intervenes between the close of one school year and the beginning of the next. Let the opponents settle the dispute by themselves. Don't intervene.
Illegible.
I could read most of the signatures, but a few were illegible.
Illiterate.
The new nation undertook to teach its illiterate citizens to read and write.
Illogical.
It is illogical to vote for a candidate whom you have no faith in.
Immaculate.
Before dinner, the tablecloth was immaculate.
Immature.
Seniors often consider sophomores too immature.
Impunity.
As a result of stricter enforcement, speeders are no longer able to break the law with impunity.
Inaccessible.
For most of the year, the Inuit settlements in northern Quebec are inaccessible except by air.
Incessant.
It is almost impossible to cross the street during the rush hour because of the incessant flow of traffic.
Inflexible.
No compromise is possible when both sides remain inflexible.
Ingratitude.
Valerie refuses to let me see her notes, though I have always lent her mine. What ingratitude!
Inhospitable.
When the visitors come to our school, we should make them feel at home. Otherwise, they will think we are inhospitable.
Insoluble.
Scientists are finding solutions to many problems that formerly seemed insoluble. Salt dissolves in water, but sand is insoluble.
Irreconcilable.
After Romeo and Juliet died, their families, who had been irreconcilable enemies, became friends.
Irrelevant.
Stick to the topic, don't make irrelevant remarks.
Irrevocable.
As an umpire's decision is irrevocable, it is useless to argue over a call.
Benediction.
Robinson Crusoe ran off to sea against his parents' wishes and without their benediction.
Malediction.
With her dying breath, Queen Dido pronounced a malediction on Aeneas and all his descendants.
Benefactor.
The museum could not have been built without the gift of $10 million by a wealthy benefactor.
Malefactor.
Shortly after the crime, the malefactor was apprehended and brought to trial.
Beneficial.
Rest is usually beneficial to a person suffering from a bad cold.
Beneficiary.
The sick and the needy will be the beneficiaries of your gift to the community fund.
Benevolent.
Benevolent employers have a sincere concern for the welfare of their employees.
Malevolent.
In Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Kidnapped, David Balfour visits a malevolent uncle who tries to kill him.
Maladjusted.
Having grown up in a quiet small town, Jesse was now a maladjusted city dweller who complained about noise and crowds.
Malice.
My tire did not have a leak. Someone had deflated it out of malice.
Malnutrition.
The lack of fresh fruit and vegetables in a person's diet may cause malnutrition.
Maltreat.
Jen felt maltreated when the teacher scolded her for something that was not her fault.
Decadent.
The decadent rooming house was once a flourishing hotel.
Deciduous.
Maple, elm, birch, and other deciduous trees lose their leaves in the fall.
Demented.
Whoever did this must have been demented. No sane person would have acted in such a way.
Demolish.
A wrecking crew is demolishing the old building.
Demote.
For being absent without leave, the corporal was demoted to private.
Dependent.
Children are dependent on their parents until they are able to earn their own living.
Depreciate.
New automobiles depreciate rapidly, but antiques tend to go up in value. The store manager would feel you are depreciating him if you refer to him as the head clerk.
Despise.
Benedict Arnold was despised by his fellow Americans for betraying his country.
Deviate.
Dr. Parker does not see a patient without an appointment, except in an emergency, and she does not deviate from this policy.
Devour.
Wendy must have been starved. She devoured her food.
Discontent.
Dan was discontent with the mark on his Spanish exam. He had expected at least 10 points more.
Discredit.
The parents discredited the child's story since he was in the habit of telling falsehoods.
Discrepancy.
The first witness said the incident had occurred at 10 a.m., but the second witness insisted the time was 10:45. This discrepancy puzzled the police.
Disintegrate.
The driveway needs to be resurfaced. It is beginning to disintegrate.
Dispassionate.
For a dispassionate account of how the fight started, ask a neutral observer, not a participant.
Disrepair.
The new owner did not take proper care of the building, and it soon fell into disrepair.
Dissent.
When the matter was put to a vote, 29 agreed and 4 dissented.
Dissident.
The compromise was welcomed by all the strikers except a small dissident group who felt that the raises were too small.
Distract.
When the bus is in motion, passengers should do nothing to distract the driver.
Secede.
When Lincoln was elected president in 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union.
Secession.
South Carolina's secession was followed by that of 10 other states and led to the formation of the Confederacy.
Seclude.
Monica was so upset over losing her job that she secluded herself and refused to see anyone.
Secure.
Are you worried about passing, or do you feel secure? Guests who want their valuables to be secure are urged to deposit them in the hotel vault.
Sedition.
The signers of the Declaration of Independence, if captured by the enemy, would probably have been tried for sedition.
Segregate.
During the swim period, the non-swimmers are segregated from the rest of our group to receive special instruction.
Circumference.
The circumference of the Earth is greatest at the equator and diminishes as we go toward the North or South Pole.
Circumlocution.
The circumlocution, the game ended with a score that was not in our favor, should be replaced by we lost the game.
Circumnavigate.
Ferdinand Magellan's expedition was the first to circumnavigate the globe.
Circumscribe.
On the composition I got back, the teacher had circumscribed a misspelled word to call it to my attention. The patient was placed on a very circumscribed diet. There are very few foods she is permitted to eat.
Circumspect.
Don't jump to a conclusion before considering all the facts. Be circumspect.
Circumvent.
To circumvent local sales taxes, shoppers buy in neighboring communities that do not have such taxes.
Coalesce.
During the Revolutionary War, the 13 colonies coalesced into one nation.
Coherent.
In coherent writing, every sentence is connected in thought to the previous sentence.
Collaborate.
George and Helen Papashvili collaborated on Anything Can Happen and several other books.
Collusion.
The federal agency claimed the price increases were due to collusion among the producers.
Concord.
Neighbors cannot live in concord if their children keep fighting with one another.
Congenital.
Helen Keller's deafness and blindness were not congenital defects. She was normal at birth.
Convene.
The House and the Senate will convene at noon to hear an address by the President.
Correspond.
Helene's account of how the argument started does not correspond with Sam's version. Bill and I correspond regularly.
Obliterate.
Today's rain has completely obliterated yesterday's snow. Not a trace remains.
Obsess.
Ian is obsessed with the idea of becoming a professional ball player.
Obstacle.
If Albert were to visit Rome, the language would be no obstacle. He knows Italian.
Obstruct.
The disabled vehicles obstructed traffic until removed by a tow truck.
Obtrude.
It is unwise for outsiders to obtrude their opinions into a family quarrel.
Obviate.
By removing her hat, the woman in front obviated the need for me to change my seat.
Perennial.
Authors have come and gone, but Shakespeare has remained a perennial favorite.
Perforate.
The tack I stepped on went through the sole of my shoe, but luckily did not perforate my skin.
Permeate.
The aroma of freshly brewed coffee permeated the cafeteria.
Perplex.
I need help with the fourth problem. It perplexes me.
Persist.
Dr. Brown warned Janet of the consequences if she persisted in smoking despite his warnings. The rain was supposed to end in the morning, but it persisted through the afternoon and evening.
Pertinent.
Stick to the point. Don't give information that is not pertinent.
Perturb.
Sandra's folks were perturbed when they learned she had failed 2 subjects.
Proceed.
Did your complaint follow or precede Jane's?
Preclude.
A prior engagement precludes my coming to your party.
Precocious.
If Nancy's 3-year-old sister can read, she must be a precocious child.
Preconceive.
The dislike I had preconceived for the book disappeared when I read a few chapters.
Prefabricated.
Prefabricated homes are quickly erected by putting together large sections previously constructed at a factory.
Preface.
The preface usually provides information that the reader should know before beginning the book.
Premature.
Since less than half of the votes have been counted, my opponent's claims of victory are premature.
Premeditate.
The jury decided that the blow was struck in a moment of panic and had not been premeditated.
Presume.
19 of the sailors have been rescued. 1 is missing and presumed dead.
Preview.
Last night, Carol and Bob attended a preview of a play scheduled to open next Tuesday.
Procrastinate.
Start working on the assignment without delay. It doesn't pay to procrastinate.
Proficient.
When I fell behind, the teacher asked one of the more proficient students to help me.
Profuse.
Despite a large income, the actor has saved very little because he is a profuse spender.
Project.
The fireboat's powerful engines projected huge streams of water on the blazing pier.
Prominent.
The mayor, the governor, and several other prominent citizens attended the preview.
Propel.
High winds propelled the flames and they spread rapidly.
Proponent.
At the budget hearing, both proponents and opponents of the tax increase will be able to present their views.
Prospect.
To a first-year student, graduation is a distant but pleasant prospect.
Prospects.
The prospects of our winning are slim.
Protract.
Our cousins stayed with us only for the day, though we urged them to protract their visit.
Protrude.
Keep your feet under your desk. If they protrude into the aisle, someone may trip over them.
Provoke.
Maria's account of her experiences as a babysitter provoked much laughter. There would have been no quarrel if Lisa hadn't provoked you by calling you a liar.
Amateur.
The performance was staged by a group of amateurs who have been studying dramatics as a hobby. When it comes to baking a cake, you are the expert. I'm only an amateur.
Amiable.
Charlotte is an amiable person. Everybody likes her.
Amicable.
Let us try to settle our differences in an amicable manner.
Amity.
We must look ahead to the time when the dispute is over and amity is restored.
Amorous.
In the famous balcony scene, amorous Romeo expresses undying love for Juliet.
Enamored.
Jason became enamored of the young woman and asked her to marry him.
Animosity.
Someday the animosity that led to the war will be replaced by amity.
Animus.
Though Howard defeated me in the election, I bear no animus toward him. We are good friends.
Equanimity.
If you become extremely upset when you lose a game, it is a sign that you lack equanimity.
Magnanimous.
The first time I was late for practice, Ms. O'Neill excused me with the warning that she would not be so magnanimous the next time.
Unanimity.
In almost every discussion, there is bound to be some disagreement. Don't expect unanimity.
Unanimous.
Except for one student who voted no, the class was unanimous in wanting the party.
Affinity.
Because they share the same language and ideals, the Americans and the English have an affinity for one another.
Confine.
I will confine my remarks to the causes of inflation. The next speaker will discuss its effects.
Definitive.
The officials accused of bribery confessed when the district attorney presented definitive evidence of their guilt.
Finale.
The acting was superb from the opening scene to the finale.
Finis.
The word finis on the screen indicated that the film had ended.
Fluctuate.
Last week, the stock fluctuated from a high of 19 to a low of 17.
Fluent.
Do you have to grope for words, or are you a fluent speaker?
Fluid.
Air, water, molasses, and milk are all fluids.
Flux.
When prices are in a state of flux, many buyers delay purchases until conditions are more settled.
Influx.
The discovery of gold in California in 1848 caused a large influx of settlers from the east.
Degenerate.
But for the skill of the presiding officer, the debate would have degenerated into an exchange of insults.
Engender.
Name-calling engenders hatred.
Genre.
The writer achieved distinction in two literary genres, the short story and the novel.
Progenitor.
The Bible states that Adam and Eve were the progenitors of the human race.
Regenerate.
The new manager regenerated the losing team and made it a strong contender.
Aggregate.
The aggregate strength of the Allies was impressive, though individually some were quite weak.
Aggregation.
At the airport, the homecoming champions were welcomed by a huge aggregation of admirers.
Congregation.
The minister addressed the congregation on the meaning of brotherhood.
Gregarious.
Human beings, as a rule, are gregarious. They enjoy being with other people.
Segregation.
The warden believes in segregation of first offenders from hardened criminals.
Adhere.
Apply the sticker according to the directions or it will not adhere.
Cohere.
I glued together the fragments of the vase, but they did not cohere.
Coherence.
If the relationship between the first sentence and what follows is not clear, the paragraph lacks coherence.
Cohesion.
There can be no real cohesion in an alliance if the parties have little in common.
Incoherent.
The speech of a person in a rage may be incoherent.
Inherent.
Because of her inherent carefulness, I am sure my sister will be a good driver.
Bilateral.
A bilateral team of federal and local experts conducted the survey.
Collateral.
After voting for the road building program, the legislature took up the collateral issue of how to raise the necessary funds.
Equilateral.
If one side of an equilateral triangle measures 3 feet, the other two must also be 3 feet each.
Lateral.
The building plan shows both a front and a lateral view of the proposed structure.
Multilateral.
A parent plays a multilateral role as a nurse, housekeeper, shopper, cook, teacher, etc.
Quadrilateral.
A square is a quadrilateral.
Unilateral.
Don't judge the matter by my opponent's unilateral statement, but wait till you have heard the other side.
Alliteration.
Note the alliteration in the line, "Sing a song of sixpence."
Literacy.
Research required a high degree of literacy.
Literal.
We translate laissez-faire as absence of government interference, but its literal meaning is let do.
Literary.
Willa Cather is one of the great writers of novels in our literary history.
Literate.
The teacher's main goal in working with adults who can neither read nor write is to make them literate.
Elucidate.
I asked the teacher to elucidate a point that was not clear to me.
Lucid.
To obviate misunderstanding, state the directions in the most lucid way possible.
Luminary.
A number of luminaries, including a Nobel Prize winner, will be present.
Luminous.
With this watch, you can tell time in the dark because its hands and dial are luminous.
Translucent.
Lampshades are translucent but not transparent.
Emancipate.
The washing machine has emancipated millions of people from a great deal of drudgery.
Manacle.
The manacles were removed from the prisoner's wrists.
Mandate.
The overwhelming vote for the reform slate is regarded as a mandate from the people to root out corruption. By a close margin, the workers voted to comply with the court's mandate against a strike.
Manipulate.
In today's lesson, I learned how to manipulate the steering wheel. The defeated candidate charged that the election results had been manipulated.
Manual.
Each student has a learner's permit and a copy of the driver's manual.
Manuscript.
The author's manuscript is now at the printer.
Append.
If you hand in your report late, append a note explaining the reason for the delay.
Appendix.
A school edition of a novel usually has an appendix containing explanatory notes.
Impending.
At the first flash of lightning, we scurried for shelter from the impending storm.
Pendant.
The pendant dangling from the chain around her neck looked like a medal, but it was really a timepiece.
Pending.
Has a date been set for the game, or is the matter still pending?
Suspend.
Would you prefer to attach a lamp to the wall or suspend one from the ceiling? Service will be suspended from midnight to 4 a.m. to permit repairs.
Suspense.
If you have seen the marks posted, please tell me whether I passed or failed. Don't keep me in suspense.
Depose.
Did the king abdicate or was he deposed? He deposed on the witness stand that he had never taken a bribe.
Impose.
Cleaning up after the job is the repair crew's responsibility. Don't let them impose it on you.
Postpone.
Our instructor has postponed the test until tomorrow to give us an extra day to study.
Superimpose.
Today's snowfall superimposed a fresh 2 inches on yesterday's accumulation.
Transpose.
There is a misspelled word on your paper, strength, S-T-R-E-N-G-H-T. Correct it by transposing the last 2 letters.
Conscript.
When there were not enough volunteers for the armed forces, the government had to conscript additional men and women.
Inscription.
The inscription on the inside of their wedding bands read, Nicole and Adam forever.
Prescribe.
The law prescribes that aliens may not vote. Her physician prescribes some pills, a light diet, and plenty of rest.
Prescribe.
The dumping of wastes into the waterways is prescribed.
Scribe.
Both candidates used professional scribes to prepare their campaign speeches.
Script.
How much time did the actors have to memorize the script? I knew the note was from Mabel because I recognized her script.
Subscriber.
The petition to nominate Sue for president of the junior class already has 43 subscribers.
Assimilate.
The letter N in the prefix in is often assimilated to the following letter. For example, in plus legible becomes illegible. A bright student assimilates knowledge rapidly.
Dissimilar.
These gloves are not a pair. They are quite dissimilar.
Similarity.
The 2 pills are alike in color and shape, but there the similarity ends.
Simile.
What happens to a dream deferred? Asks Langston Hughes in one of his poems. Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Note that the last 6 words are a simile.
Simulate.
Nancy was the star of the show. She simulated the bewildered mother very effectively.
Simultaneous.
The flash of an explosion comes to us before the sound, though the 2 are really simultaneous.
Desolate.
A large section of the neighborhood was desolated by the disastrous fire.
Soul.
Franklin D. Roosevelt was the sole candidate to be elected president for a 4th term.
Soliloquy.
What an actor says in a soliloquy is heard by no one except the audience.
Solitary.
A hermit leads a solitary existence.
Solitude.
Though I like company, there are times when I prefer solitude.
Solo.
Instead of singing a solo, Brenda would prefer to join with me in a duet.
Absolute.
A democratic ruler is restricted by a constitution, a legislature, and courts, but a dictator has absolute power. The sudden rainstorm turned our picnic into an absolute mess.
Dissolution.
When President Lincoln took office, the Union faced imminent dissolution.
Dissolve.
Since the members lack mutual interests, the group will probably dissolve. After our quarrel, Grace and I dissolved our friendship.
Resolution.
The resolution of our air and water pollution problems will be difficult and costly.
Resolve.
A witness provided the clue that resolved the mystery.
Soluble.
Sugar is soluble in water. Someone would have found the answer by now if the problem were soluble.
Solvent.
In a saltwater solution, the water is the solvent and the salt is the solute.
Abound.
Our nation abounds in or with opportunities for well-educated young men and women. Fish abound in the waters off Newfoundland.
Abundant.
Before Christmas, the stores have abundant supplies of merchandise.
Inundate.
On election night, the victors' offices were inundated by congratulatory messages.
Redound.
The success of so many of its graduates redounds to the credit of the school.
Redundant.
Remove the last word of the following sentence because it is redundant. My report is longer than Bob's report.
Aver.
Two eyewitnesses averred they had seen the defendant at the scene.
Veracity.
Since he has lied to us in the past, he should not wonder that we doubt his veracity.
Verdict.
A hung jury is one that has been unable to reach a verdict.
Verify.
So far, the charges have been neither disproved nor verified.
Veritable.
As the pretended heirs of Peter Wilkes were disposing of his fortune, the veritable heirs arrived.
Verity.
That smoking is injurious to health is a scientifically established verity.
Envision.
Mr. Brown envisions for Marcia a bright career as a fashion designer.
Improvise.
Did you prepare your jokes before the program or improvise them as you went along?
Invisible.
The microscope enables us to see organisms invisible to the naked eye.
Revise.
Before handing in your composition, be sure to revise it carefully.
Video.
The audio, sound, and video signals of a television program can be recorded on magnetic tape.
Videotape.
If we videotape the party, we can show it later to those who could not attend.
Visibility.
With the fog rolling in and visibility approaching zero, it was virtually impossible for planes to land.
Visual.
Radar tells us of an approaching object long before visual contact is possible.
Authentic.
When you withdraw money, the bank may compare your signature with the one in its files to see if it is authentic.
Autobiography.
In her autobiography, The Story of My Life, Helen Keller tells how unruly she was as a young child.
Autocrat.
The autocrat was replaced by a ruler responsible to the people.
Autograph.
The baseball star wrote his autograph for an admirer who came up to him with a pencil and scorecard.
Automatic.
Some cars require the driver to shift gears manually, while others have an automatic transmission.
Automation.
Many workers have lost their jobs as a result of automation.
Automaton.
An autocrat prefers subjects who are automatons rather than intelligent human beings.
Autonomous.
The Alumni Association is not under the control of the school. It is a completely autonomous group.
Autonomy.
After World War II, many former colonies were granted autonomy and became independent nations.
Autopsy.
The cause of the celebrity's sudden death will not be known until the autopsy has been performed.
Aristocracy.
Before 1789, France was an aristocracy. When the Revolution of 1789 began, many members of the French aristocracy fled to other lands.
Autocracy.
Germany under Adolf Hitler was an autocracy.
Bureaucracy.
The mayor was criticized for setting up an inefficient bureaucracy unresponsive to the needs of the people.
Democracy.
The 13 colonies developed into the first democracy in the Western Hemisphere.
Plutocracy.
If only millionaires can afford to run for office, we may soon become a plutocracy.
Technocracy.
In a technocracy, the governing class would consist largely of engineers.
Aristocrat.
An aristocrat would like to see members of the upper class in control of the government. Winston Churchill was born an aristocrat. He was the son of Sir Randolph Churchill.
Democrat.
The senator used to be a Republican, but she is now a Democrat.
Demagogue.
No responsible leader, only a demagogue, would make campaign speeches promising to solve all the people's problems.
Democratic.
A nation cannot be considered democratic unless its leaders are chosen by the people in free elections.
Democratize.
The adoption of the 19th Amendment, giving women the franchise, greatly democratized our nation.
Epidemic.
Greater federal and state aid is needed in areas where unemployment is epidemic.
Panacea.
The international treaty will reduce tensions, but it will not resolve all conflict. It is no panacea.
Pan-American.
The Pan American Highway links all the countries of the Western Hemisphere, from Alaska to Chile.
Pandemonium.
The huge crowds in Times Square grew noisier as the old year ticked away, and when midnight struck, there was pandemonium.
Panoply.
The opposing knights, mounted and in full panoply, awaited the signal for the tournament to begin.
Panorama.
From the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, you can get an excellent panorama of New York's harbor.
Pantomime.
Not until The Great Dictator did Charlie Chaplin play a speaking part. All his previous roles were in pantomime.
Anachronism.
The actor playing the Roman gladiator forgot to remove his wristwatch, creating an amusing anachronism.
Chronicle.
One of the earliest accounts of King Arthur occurs in a 12th century chronicle of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Chronological.
The magazines in this file are not in chronological order. I found the February issue after the October one.
Chronology.
In the chronology of American presidents, Ulysses S. Grant comes after Andrew Johnson.
Synchronize.
The clocks in the library need to be synchronized. One is a minute and a half behind the other.
Kleptomania.
The millionaire arrested for shoplifting was found to be suffering from kleptomania.
Mania.
For a student with an A average to quit school 2 months before graduation is sheer mania. Though I still read science fiction, I no longer have the mania for it that I originally had.
Maniac.
The deranged behavior of the narrator in The Telltale Heart leaves little doubt that he is a maniac.
Maniacal.
You protested in such a loud, violent, and maniacal manner that onlookers must have thought you had lost your sanity.
Pyromania.
The person charged with setting the fire had been suspected of pyromania on 2 previous occasions.
Encyclopedia.
There are 4 different encyclopedias in the reference section of our school library.
Orthopedic.
Patients recovering from broken limbs are treated in the hospital's orthopedic ward.
Pedagogue.
The new teacher received a great deal of help from the more experienced pedagogues.
Pedagogy.
Dr. Dworkin's lessons are usually excellent. She is a master of pedagogy.
Pediatrician.
When the baby developed a fever, the parents telephoned the pediatrician.
Pediatrics.
From the number of baby carriages outside the office, you can tell that Dr. Enders specializes in pediatrics.
Orthodontist.
A teenager wearing braces is obviously under the care of an orthodontist.
Orthodox.
There was no religious liberty in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Roger Williams, for example, was banished because he did not accept Orthodox Puritan beliefs.
Orthography.
American and English orthography are very much alike. One difference, however, is in words like honor, H-O-N-O-R, and labor, L-A-B-O-R, which the English spell honor, H-O-N-O-U-R, and labor, L-A-B-O-U-R.
Orthopedist.
A deformity of the spine is a condition that requires the attention of an orthopedist.
Unorthodox.
Vaccination was rejected as unorthodox when Dr. Jenner first suggested it.
Genealogy.
Diane can trace her descent from an ancestor who fought in the Mexican War. I know much less about my own genealogy.
Genesis.
According to legend, the Trojan War had its genesis in a dispute among 3 Greek goddesses.
Heterogeneous.
Many different racial and cultural groups are to be found in the heterogeneous population of a large American city.
Homogeneous.
All the dancers in the ballet corps wore the same costume to present a homogeneous appearance.
Homogenize.
If dairies did not homogenize milk, the cream would be concentrated at the top instead of being evenly distributed.
Barometer.
When the barometer indicates a rapid drop in air pressure, it means a storm is coming.
Chronometer.
Unlike ordinary clocks and watches, chronometers are little affected by temperature changes or vibration.
Diameter.
Some giant redwood trees measure up to 30 feet, 9.14 meters in diameter.
Meter.
When water meters are installed, it will be easy to tell how much water each home is using. A meter is 3.37 inches longer than a yard.
Odometer.
All eyes, except the driver's, were fastened on the odometer as it moved from 9,999.9 to 10,000 miles.
Photometer.
The intensity of a source of light, such as an electric light bulb, can be measured with a photometer.
Speedometer.
I advised Anne to slow down as we were in a 30-mile-an-hour zone and her speedometer registered more than 40.
Symmetry.
As the planes passed overhead, we were impressed by the perfect symmetry of their V formation.
Antagonist.
Great Britain was our antagonist in the War of 1812.
Antibiotic.
The antibiotic penicillin stops the growth of bacteria that cause pneumonia, tonsillitis, and certain other diseases.
Antibody.
When the body is invaded by foreign agents, such as bacteria or viruses, the antibodies go to work against them.
Antidote.
By telephone, the physician prescribed the exact antidote to be given immediately to the poison victim. Heavy fines are an antidote to illegal parking.
Antihistamine.
The antihistamine prescribed for my cold was not too effective.
Antipathy.
A few of the neighbors have an antipathy to dogs, but most are fond of them.
Antiseptic.
The wound was carefully washed, then hydrogen peroxide was applied as an antiseptic.
Antitoxin.
We are injected with diphtheria antitoxin produced in horses because the antitoxin manufactured by our bodies may not be enough to prevent diphtheria.
Antonym.
Temporary is the antonym of permanent.
Acronym.
The word radar is an acronym for radio detecting and range.
Anonymous.
An anonymous American killed in combat in World War I lies in the tomb of the unknowns.
Homonym.
Fair, F-A-I-R, and fair, F-A-R-E, are homonyms.
Onomatopoeia.
Notice the onomatopoeia in these lines by the poet John Dryden, the double, double, double beat of the thundering drum.
Pseudonym.
Because of antipathy to female authors in her time, Mary Ann Evans wrote under the pseudonym George Eliot.
Synonym.
Building is a synonym for edifice.
Dermatologist.
The patient with the skin disorder is under the care of a dermatologist.
Dermis.
The tiny cells from which hairs grow are located in the dermis.
Epidermis.
Although very thin, the epidermis protects the underlying dermis.
Hypodermic.
A hypodermic syringe is used for injecting medication beneath the skin.
Taxidermist.
The lifelike models of animals that you see in museums are the work of skilled taxidermists.
Agronomy.
The science of agronomy helps farmers obtain larger and better crops.
Astronomical.
The first astronomical observations with a telescope were made by the Italian scientist Galileo. It is difficult to conceive of so astronomical a sum as $1 trillion.
Economic.
The President's chief economic advisor expects that production will continue at the same rate for the rest of the year.
Economical.
Which is the most economical fuel for home heating, gas, electricity, or oil?
Gastronome.
Being a gastronome, my uncle is well acquainted with the best restaurants in the city.
Nemesis.
The tyrant Macbeth was invincible in combat until he faced Macduff, who proved to be his nemesis. We would have ended the season without a defeat if not for our old nemesis, Greeley High.
Cellophane.
When used as a wrapper, cellophane lets the purchaser see the contents of the package.
Diaphanous.
Pedestrians on the sidewalk could see some of the inside of the restaurants through its diaphanous curtains.
Fancy.
We must be able to distinguish between fact and fancy.
Fantastic.
Robert Fulton's proposal to build a steamboat was at first regarded as fantastic.
Fantasy.
Selma is not sure whether she saw a face at the window. Perhaps it was only a fantasy.
Phantom.
The phantom of the slain Caesar appeared to Brutus in a dream.
Phenomenal.
Bernadine has a phenomenal memory. She never forgets a face.
Phenomenon.
We do not see many adults traveling to work on bicycles, but in some foreign cities it is a common phenomenon. Renowned as a composer and performer while yet in his teens, Mozart was a musical phenomenon.
Diathermy.
Diathermy may be used to treat arthritis, bursitis, and other conditions requiring heat treatment.
Thermal.
At lava hot springs in Idaho, visitors may bathe in the thermal mineral waters.
Thermometer.
At 6 a.m., the thermometer registered 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius.
Thermonuclear.
It is believed that the sun gets its energy from thermonuclear reactions constantly taking place within it.
Thermostat.
You can set the thermostat to shut off the heat when the room reaches a comfortable temperature.
Protagonist.
Brutus is the protagonist in William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and Anthony is the antagonist.
Protocol.
The protocol initiated by the representatives of the three nations is expected to lead to a formal treaty. It is a breach of protocol for a subordinate publicly to question the judgment of a superior officer.
Protoplasm.
The presence of protoplasm distinguishes living from non-living things.
Prototype.
The crude craft in which the Wright brothers made the first successful flight in 1903 was the prototype of the modern airplane.
Protozoan.
The tiny protozoan is believed to be the first animal to have appeared on Earth.
Antithesis.
I cannot vote for a candidate who stands for the antithesis of what I believe.
Epithet.
Anna Mary Robertson Moses earned the epithet Grandma because she did not begin to paint until her late 70s.
Hypothesis.
When Columbus first presented his hypothesis that the Earth is round, very few believed it.
Synthesis.
Much of the rubber we use is not a natural product but a synthesis of chemicals.
Synthetic.
Cotton is a natural fiber, but rayon and nylon are synthetic.
Thesis.
Do you agree with Ellen's thesis that a student court would be good for our school? Candidates for PhD degrees usually must write a thesis based on original research.
Aster.
Most asters bloom in the fall.
Asterisk.
The asterisk after reduced to $9.95 refers the shopper to a footnote reading small and medium only.
Asteroid.
Compared to planet Earth, some asteroids are tiny, measuring less than a mile in diameter. If an asteroid loses an arm to an attacker, it can grow back the missing arm.
Astrologer.
An astrologer would have people believe that their lives are regulated by the movements of the stars, planets, sun, and moon.
Astronaut.
Yuri Gagarin, the world's first astronaut, orbited the Earth in an artificial satellite on April 12, 1961.
Astronomer.
Because the stars are so far away, astronomers measure their distance from Earth in light years. 1 light year equals about 6 trillion miles.
Disaster.
The attack on Pearl Harbor was the worst disaster in the history of the U.S. Navy.
Anagram.
Mote is an anagram for atom.
Cartographer.
Ancient cartographers did not know of the existence of the Western Hemisphere.
Cryptogram.
Military leaders, diplomats, and industrialists use cryptograms to relay secret information.
Electrocardiogram.
After reading Henrietta's electrocardiogram, the physician assured her that her heart was working properly.
Epigram.
The more things a man is ashamed of, the more respectable he is one of George Bernard Shaw's epigrams.
Graphic.
The reporter's graphic description made us feel that we were present at the scene.
Graphite.
Lead pencils do not contain lead, but rather a mixture of clay and graphite.
Monogram.
My monogram appears on the front of my warm-up jacket.
Monograph.
For her thesis, my sister wrote a monograph on the life of an obscure 19th century composer.
Stenographer.
A court stenographer has to be able to take down more than 250 words a minute.
Typographical.
Proofs submitted by the printers should be carefully checked to eliminate typographical errors.